E pua wai au no rongi te tikanga he raurenga no roto I te raukura, o taku raukura he mana anui ki te ao. E ngā mema o tēnei o ngā komiti tina koutou katoa. Ko Liana Poutu tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei o te taihawa auru o Mania Poto, o te awa tupua o te kahui tupua hoki. Kāori au I te paku whakai ki tēnei o ngā piri. My background is set out in my written submission, and my written submission also addresses 5 key points. So those have been well covered, I think, by submitters in previous hearings, so I won't go into detail on those, but I will offer some reflections in terms of a recent involvement of mine in Te Ture Whakatupua mō te Kāhui Tupua. So in my submission, I talk about 5 key points, the first being the bill will create uncertainty, and essentially my view is that it ignores over 40 years of well-developed and argued treaty jurisprudence. Secondly, the bill is misleading and dangerous. It proposes to rewrite the text of Te Tiriti in essence under the guise of principles. The third point I make is that the bill represents a unilateral amendment of Te Tiriti. So one party to Te Tiriti has been completely ignored in the development of the proposed principles. Fourth point in my submission is that the bill is a heinous act of bad faith. It goes against all of the treaty settlement negotiation processes I've been involved in, and it's contrary to all of the Crown apologies contained in those treaty settlements. The final key point I make in my written submission, is that the bill debate is divisive and unhealthy. The level of hate generated by this bill is unprecedented and overwhelmingly aimed at Māori. So if I can offer some reflections now, I was one of the negotiators on behalf of Ngā Iwi o Taranaki for the Taranaki Maunga redress, and saw many of you in the House last week when we were there. I offer these reflections because in the apology for Taranaki Maunga, which is contained in Te Ruruku Pūtake Rongo, the collective redress deed, it's also included in Te Ture Whakatupua mō te Kāhui Tupua, which is the collective redress act, which has now received royal assent. So there are essentially 3 paragraphs in the apology to us, and I'm going to read for you quickly 3 parts, a piece from each of those paragraphs. The first, it says, the Crown is sorry that the promise of partnership that arose in 1840 so quickly became a history of conflict, confiscation and neglect. In the second paragraph of the apology, states the Crown deeply regrets its many breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and its principles, and the immense and compounding harm they have inflicted on the whānau, hapu and iwi of Taranaki. And in the final paragraph of the apology contained in our redress deed and the redress legislation, it states the Crown also looks to a future where Taranaki Maunga symbolises and embodies a relationship with you that is founded on trust and a shared respect for Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi, and its principles. Now, I know what principles my tupuna and I understand to be embodied in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I know what principles are referred to in Te Ruruku Pūtake Rongo and Te Ture Whakatupua mō te Kāhui Tupua. I know what principles have been tested through the highest of courts in this country and have been debated over several decades. I know what principles every party in the House supported when passing Te Ture Whakatupua mō te Kāhui Tupua just last week. And what the irony is to me is that the proposed principles here are designed to create certainty. And my view is that these principles have been developed because suddenly they don't fit a particular point of view. They don't suit a modern day kind of view, or what's purported to be a modern day view of this country. And what I want to say is that, one of the proposed principles is about the rights of equality, rights to equality. And I want to say that my tupuna didn't ever receive that kind of equality. My tupuna were arrested for ploughing their own land. They were never charged, they were never tried, yet they were imprisoned for years in the South Island, in Te Waipounamu, and served years of hard labour. That's not equality. And you can't tell me that that is a principle that our tupuna signed up to. They didn't sign up to be treated like that. They signed up to be equal. And to suddenly say, actually, one sector of our country is not being, is getting preferential treatment. That doesn't fly in my book. And it doesn't fly in my book because our lived experience of our tupuna doesn't reflect that. I'm keen to leave some time for question. But I will just quickly say that I recommend the bill is rejected, that no referendum is held, and that the government commit to honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Reira tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. I'm hopeful we'll get through the 3 members who have questions. Let's go first to Steve Abel.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your very powerful submission. You say at the end that you've never witnessed so much racial tension, aggression, and blatant disregard and respect for other human beings as you have since this bill was proposed and introduced. The author of the bill argues that they're just kicking around ideas and that this is a natural part of debate. But can you articulate to the committee, for those of us who are tangata tiriti and Pākehā and are not the subject of this nastiness, because we don't get to experience it, what sort of things you are experiencing now as a result of the license that has been given by this bill to those nastiest instincts of some people in our society?
those who aren't the subject of this hatred and this divisiveness, you don't have to prevent your kids from going on social media. You don't have to explain to your children that they need to ignore that kind of stuff. You don't have to listen to your kids question you why they don't matter, why people think they don't matter. You don't have to continually explain yourselves why you have a particular view, because your tupuna weren't treated the way that they were treated. Your lands weren't taken off you. In Taranaki, in our view, our lands were confiscated. They were never legally taken. And so, you know, when you are under a barrage and you're having to put constant energy into all of that responsiveness, you know, it becomes draining when we could be putting our energy on more positive things.
Liana, tākuta.
Tēnā koe te tuahine, o te rako tō te maunga tipu ara, I tō koutou whakamoe te ingoa o Egmont me te aranga anō Taranaki, tēnā koutou. Ko tahi pēr, kia koe, you talk about it's open contravention of Crown apologies to Māori. It's openly and blatantly just steamrolling over all of the commitments that the Crown has made to Māori through the apology process, addressing historic rights, clear breaches. So do you think, I think this, I'm going to ask you if you think this, do you think the bill is actually a clear and arrogant contravention of royal assent?
To write a thesis on that part, I do know. But you know, I think the issue for me is that it puts into question the 100 settlements that this government has you know, undertaken to provide redress for in this country. And actually, when you look at the one that was just passed last week, whole of house support for it, and whole of house support for the apology and those words that I read out that sit in that piece of legislation, which also looks at a future commitment to, you know, upholding the te tiriti and the principles. And I just cannot reconcile the two because they are at complete odds with one another.
Tēnā koe tuahine, ngā me.
I'm going to very quickly go to Joseph Mooney. We're a little over time, but I'm going to have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and tēnā koe, Liana. Look, accepting your point that the rights of your ancestors, their right to be equal before the law, you know, there's rights that actually come through from the Magna Carta, that no free man shall be taken or imprisoned, or be deceased of his freehold liberties or free customs, or be outlawed or exiled or anyway otherwise destroyed. So accepting your point that your forebears didn't experience that equality before the law, but do you think it's important that your descendants experience that equality before the law?
Absolutely, they should experience equality for the law. But the key issue I have with this bill is that it assumes that everyone's starting from an equal platform. It completely ignores the fact that we haven't been treated equally until this point. And so when you do that, you just create more inequalities because you have the same starting point, ignore what's happened in the past, you just are where you are. And that doesn't create equality, and it doesn't offer my tamariki mokopuna the opportunity to be treated equally.
Thank you for that, Liana. And that brings the time well to an end.
Now that's certainly, I'd say, a much better submission that needed no interruptions.
No, I mean, look, there's three quick points from me on that particular submission. I mean, you know, first is the issue that she brought up in relation to more than half a century of jurisprudence on the issue of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I must admit, you know, I find it hard to understand whether or not some of the others in favour of the bill would even know what jurisprudence was or could spell it. But I mean, the league, and that's because they keep on harking back to, you know, unelected judges and all the rest. Well, that's what living in this form of democracy means, and quite frankly, that's in every form of democracy around the world. I mean, yeah. You know, somebody's trying to convince me that North Korea has got the perfect model. The second thing that she raises, and rightfully so, is all the apologies that have been made by successive governments of different ilks over many, many years are at risk for what? And then does the government really want to entertain the possibility of Māori usurping and going past the New Zealand system all the way back to the Crown again? Because people forget that the government of New Zealand represents the Crown. The Crown is the entity involved here. And so there's that. The third thing, which Joseph Mooney brought up, was he mentioned the Magna Carta. You've got to be very careful with harking back to the Magna Carta, because after the Magna Carta were the old papal bills that brought into play the doctrine of discovery, which we're all very familiar with in Te Ao Māori. And if those who don't know about the doctrine of discovery, go and take a look at it. It basically was a papal bull many, many centuries ago, that provided the entitled families and let's just say kingdoms of Europe to basically go up and apparently discover the new world. And if they found God-fearing Christians there, not a problem. If they didn't, it was open slather. All you have to do is have a look at what happened with Australia and Aboriginal people, Māori in New Zealand. All you have to do is have a look at what the Portuguese did in Brazil, the Spanish did in South America, and so on and so forth. So I think it's dangerous territory when people start going on about things such as the Magna Carta. So, again, though it was a clear and concise submission, it raised issues worthy of consideration. It talked about the impact, and then the most powerful part was actually, you non-Māori people don't have to worry about the fact that your kids are being told to stay off social media. That your kids are literally not the subject of some of the most heinous things that people can say. I myself, Sam, have been subjected to any number of things. I mean, I can deal with it. But these kids and tamariki and children, mukapuna, call them what you will, shouldn't have to put up with this sort of stuff. And this is exactly the sort of operating environment that has been created as a result of this bill. Powerful submission.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next submission, which is was it Taita Marae Incorporated, Ngāti Pikiahu?
Ngāti Pikiahu. So Ngāti Pikiahu is the very famous tribe in the central North Island around Rotorua. These are the whānau around places like Tapuia, Tapuia Springs, all around there. Unless
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok.